everybody, welcome back to the Marko Book Club. I'm super excited because today we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite books, biggest influence on my intellectual and travel philosophy, The Wayfinders by Nat Geo Explorer-in-Residence Wade Davis. The book is called Wayfinders, Why Ancient Wisdom Matters in the Modern World. And this book, I believe, is not only hugely impactful on the way that I travel and the way that I interact with other cultures, but I think it's very important for anybody who gives two shits about the world these days, because it doesn't take too much to see that the world has a lot of problems. We have climate change, which is directly related to man's presence on the planet. We have all sorts of conflict, a lot of it based upon ethnicity or belief systems. We also have just generally a problem getting along as a human society and trying to deal with these problems. And so Wade Davis is one of the people who I respect deeply for his attempt to bring together all the different strands of human wisdom that have been scattered about around the world through different cultures. He is an anthropologist. He was trained at Harvard, and he's done all sorts of amazing field work by exploring and living with different cultures around the world, from hunter-gatherers like the San in southern Africa up to Tibetans learning about the secrets of meditation, and with Polynesians. I mean, the list goes on and on. The man has penned one of the books we recommended on Vagabrothers as a Christmas gift a while ago, called The Book of the People of the Worlds, which was essentially like an encyclopedic recount of all the different cultures of the world and really a celebration of the diversity of the planet. And this idea of the importance of ethnic diversity is central to what Wade Davis believes. He actually has a word for it. He calls it the ethnosphere, which is like the sum total of human knowledge. It's the contributions of every society on Earth, from the astronomical charts of the ancient Peruvians, to the philosophy of the Greeks, to the mindfulness practices of Tibetan Buddhists, and the book gets its name from the Polynesians, who have the concept of the Wayfinders, which I'll get to in just a little bit. Central to Davis's thesis is that this ethnodiversity is what makes the human race so special, and it's what allows us to solve the problems that we have before us now. However, the ethnosphere is eroding even faster than the biosphere. What that means is that we are losing cultures at an alarming rate, that if they were the biosphere, if we were losing species and types of trees and habitats at the same rate that we're losing cultures, we would be up in arms. It would just be, it's a catastrophe. And the way that he measures this is through the loss of languages. You know, there are over 7,000 languages in the world, and we lose one every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we have the last speaker of an ancient tongue stop speaking that language. And a lot of this is because of young people not learning the language of their grandparents and not being passed down from generation to generation. A lot of it is because people move from traditional societies into cities in pursuit of work. A lot of it is because of social media, because maybe you are watching this video from a small village that just got an internet connection, and now you see what it looks like to live in a big city, and you decide to make that journey yourself, or suddenly what you see in your day-to-day life is comparatively less than what you see on social media, and you want that. You want the new thing. For whatever reason, these languages are dying very quickly, and Wade Davis does go into a lot of detail about the identifiable causes of these language losses, a lot of it times being construction of a dam that displaces a tribe, or the destruction of the Amazon for logging and for farming purposes. And so they are identifiable causes, and there are solutions to them. But this book is not preaching. What this book really is it's an examination of how these different cultures matter, why they matter. Because you might be watching this, and Davis says this in the book, he says, you might be watching this from Kansas, and you might go, well, what does it matter to me if someone in Central Africa doesn't use their language anymore? So what if they have to learn English or French to get by? The answer is, well, sure, no problem, but now we're not going to stop speaking English and you have to learn Mandarin Chinese. How do you feel about that? You know, what happens to your poetry and your literature when suddenly you can't express it to the fullest extent that you could in your native language? You have to translate everything, and things are always lost in translation. And it's not just the language, because even though like Wade Davis describes a language as a rainforest of the mind. Every time we lose a language, it's like losing an entire rainforest of diversity and these unique forms of expression. But it's also the technologies that these cultures bring. He defines technology different than you might have heard it before. I mean, what this is really a counter narrative to is the Victorian idea from Britain, or just generally the Western centric idea from the colonial times, that progress was essentially a pyramid, that you had these barbaric, uncivilized societies at the bottom of the pyramid, and then at the very pinnacle you had Victorian England, this place of huge advancement and therefore entitlement and even, as Rudyard Kipling said, the white man's burden and responsibility to go and spread this enlightenment around the world. And obviously, as we found, that's not true, and that's quite destructive. And in colonial times, these self-righteous colonists went around and encountered all these what they saw as primitive societies. And I know people watching from India and other countries don't know that when I do this, that's called a scare quote. It means I don't actually believe that people are primitive, because I had people call me out when I said that before. So yeah, they would encounter these societies that they would see as primitive, and they would completely disregard all of their technologies. And he interprets technologies as this: the Buddhists. The Buddhists of Bhutan and Nepal and the Himalaya, who've practiced meditation for centuries, Tibetan monks, knowing more about mindfulness and the nature of consciousness than many modern psychologists. That is a technology. That is equally valid a technology as the steam engine. And in particular, this book takes the example of the Wayfinders. These were Polynesians. Polynesia is really the largest civilization on Earth. It spans 1/5 of the entire Earth's surface. There's all these different islands. And when the Europeans first encountered them, I mean, the Spanish came across them when Magellan was sailing around the world trying to circumnavigate the globe. And he goes, there's no way that these people could have come here deliberately. They must have been fishermen from South America that were blown off course, etc., etc. And it wasn't really until James Cook came by, even though he was a colonist, he took on board one of the navigators from Tahiti. This was a man who was known as a wayfinder. Wayfinders were men who were more than navigators. They were people who on long voyages around the sea would sit at the back of the ship with the eyes closed. They wouldn't go to sleep for days, weeks at a time. They would sit there and they would just feel the ocean. By having a super attuned sense of motion, they were able to feel the break that an island would make hundreds of miles away in the waves. They could feel the presence of an island south by southwest or whatever it was, not the festival, but north by northeast or whatever. They would feel that break in the waves, and they would know where they were. They could look at the stars at night and see exactly where they were with a precision that Europeans were not able to have at that time. So to give you some context, at that time, the British Crown put out a gigantic prize to figure out how to compute longitude. I mean, people could compute latitude because it was easier to see like how far north you went by, like where the stars were and the sun and all that relation. But people couldn't figure out how far east or west they were traveling. That is, everybody except for the Polynesians. They had such uniquely accurate forms of navigation, all based, again, from primary senses. No instruments, nothing like that, just looking at the stars, looking at the waves, that they constantly stunned Cook with how accurate these predictions of where they were was. At all times through Cook's long voyage, the navigator from Tahiti was able to point back and show them where Tahiti was. That's insane. And so I think Cook and his navigator, they appreciated this man's genius. It's a certain type of genius, but it was not something that was accepted throughout the entire society. British still saw them, and all the Europeans saw them as primitive people, savages, because they had loincloths on, and there's no way that these people could be as an advanced civilization as Great Britain. And so therefore they had the right to colonize them, and they lost all this technology, and it's only now that these later generations of people are rediscovering this. And this is something you see in Hawaii. They have rebuilt these ships, and they are attempting to regain this knowledge and use it to set out and sail around this gigantic culture that is Polynesia. So that's just one example. There are many different examples in this book, and I actually really enjoy the coda, the last chapter, the epilogue. It's called The Century of the Wind, and it talks a lot about what's happened in the last century. He kind of relates how all this anthropology relates to politics, and he cites a lot of examples of take for example the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, how you have a country that was once Buddhist being completely influenced by a political philosophy that was developed in industrial Europe, and how the combination of people losing their roots and not knowing exactly who they are, combined with these outside influences, has caused stuff like the Shining Path in Peru, or like I said, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, where you have massive atrocities happening because people don't really know where they come from anymore, and they're looking for answers. And it's a great essay. You should definitely read it. I'm not articulating all of it right now, and but it's just, the point is that these actions that happened hundreds of years ago are still playing out today. The lack of appreciation that we had for cultural diversity then still matters today, and we have the ability to stop this process. We have the ability to document ancient languages, whether that be something as simple as using Lakota in an episode of Westworld for the Ghost Nation, or something like that, just bringing these languages into the mainstream, showing them, celebrating them, encouraging younger people to practice them and learn them and pass them on to their children. And for us in the West, it also becomes a matter of becoming less Eurocentric, Western-centric, and starting to appreciate the gifts of other communities. Definitely check out the TED Talks. They're great ways to get a feel for his philosophy, which is really expounded in this book. He also has other books. I just bought One River. This is about the Amazon and his exploration of the tribes deep in the Amazon. Wade Davis is a seriously cool dude. If you know him, tell him I respect him greatly if you're a student at the University of British Columbia. Otherwise, guys, enjoy this book. Let me know what you think about it. Put your questions and comments down below in the comment section. Enjoy the Marko Book Club. Please share your photos on Instagram using the hashtag Marko Book Club, and we will talk soon. All right, happy reading, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.